Hey everyone, I'm Selena Shang and I'm a senior PM at Google. Today we have a special guest, Deblina, to talk about what engineers wish that PMs knew. And for those who are watching, if you want an easy way to support, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and click the link below for exclusive access to our content. Deblina, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit before diving in?
Yeah. Hey everyone. I am Deblina. I am a L5 engineer at Amazon. I've been there for about 3 years now, and I'm really excited to be here and talk to Selena.
Yeah, thank you for joining. We're really excited. So maybe just to like start us off, Um, in your experience, what do you think are some good qualities for PMs that you've worked with?
Yeah. I think PMs that have a really clear understanding of the CX. I know that might go without saying, but I have worked with PMs that are really good at that and are also not really good at that. So definitely number one is having a very clear understanding of what they would like from the users is something that I really look forward to when I'm working with PMs. Another thing is the ability for PMs to be comfortable with metrics and like tools to get product metrics. I think, metrics can give us a lot of information about, the user experience, and it really drives our decisions on how we want to kind of pivot or update our features. So, yeah, I would say, really clear CX understanding as well as the how to deal with the metrics and how to get the proper metrics, I think is really important.
That makes sense. And then CX is an Amazon term. I think that means customer experience, right?
Correct. Yes.
Got it. Okay. And then a little bit deeper on that, I know you work on Prime Video. So can you give examples of times, if you can, of like a CX that you felt, maybe we're on the same page with the PM, or just tell me more about that experience where it was good, and maybe also a little bit about when you wish it were better.
Yeah. So I think one CX that a lot of streaming services deal with is how do we deal with entitled content? So when I'm talking about entitled content, that means things that you can watch for free essentially when you get the service. So for something like Prime Video, you have a lot of like mixed entitlement. So that means that you can watch things for free. You can also purchase things. You can have subscriptions to things, and that's how you have entitlement to them. But not everything is always 100% free. And the products that I work on are essentially carousels that can have mixed entitlement types. So, what I mean by that specifically is if we're looking at, let's say, your continue watching row when you open up Prime Video, you
Mhm.
can see titles that you can directly jump into playback for because you have an offer type that you're entitled to watch that item for free with a Prime subscription, or you may have maybe added something to your watch list and that's showing up in your continue watching, but it's something that you need to purchase to actually watch. So understanding that balance of, when do we show content that customers are entitled to versus not entitled to is something that is a product decision. And working with PMs in the past, I've seen that good PMs that I've been able to work with in the past have been able to pull the correct, like, kind of customer data to understand, where we should place these entitled and unentitled content. So should we put all the entitled content at the beginning of the carousel and all the unentitled content at the end of the carousel? Should we kind of mix it in between? So we're also helping with new content discovery, things like that. So PMs that have a really strong control over the metrics that will help drive that decision, I think is really important. Going, I think, into a little bit more, I guess, like Amazon specific details, or I guess, I know you can tell me, Selena, at Google, if you guys do this too, but we have a process of essentially doing experiments before we'll
Mhm.
do big, like, CX changes, right? Like customer facing changes. And when you do those experiments, you'll set up like kind of different treatments, right? Like, so like, X percent of the population will see this treatment, Y percent of the population will see a different treatment, and Z percent of the population might see whatever the control current treatment is. And with a good PM, they will be able to kind of give us the proper, um, you know, uh, view of what each of these treatments should be like. And, when in terms of PMs that have been a little bit troublesome to work with, I would say, um, is when, the engineer will put all this work in to set up these experiments based on numbers like thresholds, for example, that a PM maybe got from some data. If those numbers are not accurate, then it's like you put all this work into this experiment and then you don't get the results you're looking for because, we didn't pick those right numbers. So yeah, so like that can be a little bit frustrating, but I guess that's the name of the game. Not everyone's perfect and the data for sure is not perfect. So looking through all that stuff can be tricky too.
No, yeah, that resonates. I'm curious, like data popped up a lot as sort of like a hard skill that's important when working with PMs. Are there any like behaviors that you notice more on like the softer side for PMs you feel are strong?
Let's see. I think PMs that are, like willing and available to talk with engineers. I only say that because, I mean, again, like you think that this was kind of obvious, but I'll say that with a previous role that I had, that was not necessarily the case. Like it was very difficult to get in touch with him. It was very difficult to, like if I needed clarification on how something's going to work, having access is really important because when, as an engineer, like from an engineering perspective, as you're, writing up the code or you're doing something, a lot of times when you do the high level design, you think that, oh, okay, this is very clear. Like, okay, we're going to do XYZ steps. And then that's what we're going to do. But as you're coding, of course, you'll a lot of times hit road bumps or, like just these edge cases that you like didn't think of. Right. So like if you're able to like easily access the PM to have that discussion on how to move forward, then that just like unblocks you quickly. You can keep moving.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it would go without saying that availability is important, but
Yeah.
coming from the PM perspective, it definitely resonates. Even like it's hard to get a hold of like partner PMs who you need to like get unblocked by. And I guess as a note, as folks grow in their PM career, like one challenge is definitely like learning how to scale yourself, because as you get busier, you do start blocking others, and so it's like, okay, how can I free myself up in other ways? So
Yeah.
maybe that's another topic we can talk about.
Yeah.
But yeah, that totally resonates.
Yeah.
Thanks for going through that. Sort of in the vein of, it sounds like you wish PMs would maybe do like more upfront data analysis. Is there anything else you wish that PMs would do more of, or less of even?
Yeah. I would say a lot of times, at least on our team, and I think this maybe goes back a little bit more to what you were saying about the ability for PMs to scale. Just as like some context, for my team, the PM that we have on our team, they are responsible for multiple teams, and that's just the way it is, just because of staffing and whatever. But I think that makes it difficult for anyone to context switch between different teams and different requirements. One thing that I would love to see more of is if they're able to come into the design discussions that engineers have. I know that a lot of times those discussions might go into a little bit like too much detail in terms of implementation, which is not something that a PM may need to be concerned with, just because like the outer product is the bigger picture that they're usually want to look at. But yeah, I think just having them on hand. So like, again, like when you're making a technical decision, if something maybe is complicated this way, but we could do it another way, it's hard to always move forward because you don't know like what's best for the customer. And like, I think that just like somehow being able to bridge that gap, especially as an engineer, like I always want to, think about what's best for the customer, but I also need to think about like what's realistic in terms of like what we can actually make, So I think that like just having a little bit more synergy between these two roles could potentially help with.
Got it. And then a clarification, like when you say on hand and being, ready to discuss design decisions, in your experiences, does a problem crop up when like the product requirements weren't clear enough to get to that design, or does the problem more crop up when you're literally like designing and you wish you had access, like more like availability with this person?
Yeah. No, that's it. Yeah, I think it maybe is a little bit of both, but at least like from my experience, I wish that we had a little bit more clear requirement breakdown, I feel like there's a kind of blurred lines in terms of like, okay, me as the one coding, I think that this might be just like the most efficient way forward. So I move forward, but like because I did not have clear requirements. So again, like going back to having the clear requirements, having access, and like an open communication line, I think is like the ideal situation if possible.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And maybe some advice if you had to offer some for, I think back in the day, PMs were like very strictly technical. They would come with CS backgrounds. I think that's very, it's becoming less common these days. So what advice would you have for someone who doesn't have that technical background to be able to like contribute in that way?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's actually something I really wanted to bring up. I honestly would highly suggest that, people who are looking to go into PM roles do, take some classes or some courses that will give them the technical skills that that would be required for that role or that product. So like, for example, let's say that you're creating some product that is big on databases, and like, take some sort of a course that gives you a background in that information, even if it's at a very high level. Because, sometimes what happens, at least, okay, again, in my experience, sometimes what happens is a PM will ask for something and it's a great idea if you had those data points or you had the technology to do that. But if you don't, it sometimes becomes very difficult to explain why this isn't going to work. And like,
Mm.
PM and engineer can butt heads and then we don't, it's just a waste of time. So, uh, so, I think if a little bit of technical background is possible in the space that you're in, I honestly think that would be like a super helpful.
Got it. And then I think from like for those who are listening, I think just brainstorming, I think components that are similar to most things you're working on would be some sort of like client server class, some sort of database class. Deblina, do you have any other that you might recommend?
Let's see. I would say if you can do like something in data and like data analytics, or if you can do some sort of like data processing kind of course, just like understanding how you can do quick SQL queries and big databases, things like that. I think those are really helpful tools, especially when you're working with when you're like a data driven sort of product,
Yeah, makes sense. And I think most FAANG companies would be data driven. So if that's your goal, it makes sense. Cool.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So then it sounds like sort of like fluency with data is a big important area. So is like availability and like communication. What are other great ways that PMs can start to build rapport and trust with engineers in your mind?
Honestly, I would say, again, like if you're new to your role and you're trying to understand how like the big picture works, I think having a strong understanding of the big picture of your product is really important, because a lot of times we might end up having a little bit of a tunnel vision, right? Like this is my lane, this is like what I'm working on. It's harder to see where you fall in the bigger scheme of things. So having that foresight is really important. I would say not just for PMs, but just for, people in the technical space in general. I think that's helpful just to, to move forward and just to see how you can make a better impact that's going to help the product overall.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And maybe to round out, do you have a PM ick?
Yeah. Okay. Again, we're coming back to the theme of data.
Mm.
I have often been asked to, get a metric, and like the phrase "get a metric" is like an ick to me. It can be very vague, right? Like
Mm.
you need to be very specific in how you define a metric. And I've heard this so many times where it's like, oh, don't we have metrics on this? Don't we have metrics on that? And I'm like, no, we don't have metrics on everything.
Because you didn't ask.
Yeah, you didn't ask before.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I think, when I hear the phrase, do we have the metrics? I'm like, no.
That is so funny. Yeah, it's like it's a project requirement, right? It's the same. Yeah, you have to ask for it. You have to build it. That is so true. do you have advice? Okay, for PMs who are listening to this, you can't just like a bad ask would be like how many DAO, how many wow. Like, do you have advice on the level of specificity like you as an engineer might want?
Yeah. Honestly, like again, going back to like if you're comfortable with using the data, what I would suggest is if you could do like a small scale query, right? For like what you're looking for, like take a small sample set of the data, do a small query, and then show us exactly the numbers that you're looking for. Then like an engineer can go in and do like a big scale sort of aggregation of that information. So that's one thing that I would say. Also, when when you're asking for a metric, I would suggest, just keeping in mind that not all of these are available. So like in the timeline of things when you're asking for it, just make sure that you keep in mind that, it might take some time to get that data. It's not something that's always just gonna be available to you.
Yeah, like everyone's working on other things and
Yeah, exactly. Be mindful of other people's times too.
yeah, makes sense. Yeah, make sure there's like an actionable reason you're asking for the
Yes.
data and you have a hypothesis going in. If you see this, we would do that. If you see that, we would do this.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that resonates a lot.
Yes.
Let's see. Any parting words for PMs listening in on this?
I think PMs are really important to the vision, right? So just make sure that you try to keep as clear as a vision as you can. Please don't try to change requirements all of a sudden in the middle of development.
I love that.
Try to be involved in the design process from the start if you can. And just, have fun with it. Like you guys have a lot of space for creativity. And, you can pass that on and hopefully you can build really cool things. So yeah, just have fun with it.
Awesome. Those are wise words. And thanks for all your hard work on Prime Video. I definitely watch way too much of that.
So Selena, I have a question for you.
Yes.
At Google, what is the process of bringing a product to life?
Yeah, and like especially how does it relate with some of the things we talked about? I think every team is different, obviously, and some are more nimble than others. I think Google actually skews a little bit waterfall, which is surprising in that like it's PM UX and UXR, like defining the requirements, and then Eng getting looped in to like draft the design, and then locking those requirements and starting execution. I think at least that surprised me when I joined Google. I think the ideal mode at least is to have Eng like in those early discussions so they're understanding where those user requirements are coming from, understanding that context. But I don't know, unfortunately I don't think it's always like that. Does that answer some of your question?
Yeah, that's actually really interesting because I'm thinking about it from the Amazon perspective. I think it's a little bit more of what you were mentioning where like it seems like engineers come up with a list of things that they would like to prioritize or do in terms of like, feature development or enhancing something. And then we'll take that to the PM and then they'll help us prioritize it based on, I guess, like a customer studies or whatever that they do on their side. So yeah, that's
Oh, interesting. So it's
I was gonna say that I actually came into it thinking that it would be more like what you are describing at Google, where it's like more of like the PM to engineer, whereas I feel like it's kind of the other way.
Oh, so engineers are going to PMs and be like, please staff this.
Yeah.
Oh, huh. Do you think that's unique to Prime Video or do you feel that's like an Amazon thing?
I that's a great question. I actually have seen this in other Prime Video teams for sure. It perhaps could be an Amazon trend just because like we have this very like move fast mentality. So a lot of the times it's like, okay, we have an idea, let's just do it and then present it and see how it falls with users. So
Got it. Okay, yeah, I'm curious because I think remind me like your team is less of like big UI changes and more about like optimizing the like carousel like you mentioned. Is that right?
yeah, I would say
That's part of it.
yeah. Yeah.
Just like for us, we are working on like bigger like UX changes. And so that's going to originate with like PM UX. But like for you all, where like the impact is realized through optimizations and like algorithmic improvements, totally makes sense that Eng might come to the PM. And that's not to say on my team on photos, like Eng don't come with great ideas. They do, and we staff them all the time. But I think the like traditional sense is that it sort of moves linearly that way.
Oh, that's a really good perspective. Yeah, no, that I think you're probably right about that.
And then I didn't mention this before, but the culture at Google for PMs pulling their data is like non-existent. So
Oh,
kudos to
no.
Amazon. Kudos to Amazon PMs. Yeah, I think like we're very lucky in that we have, at least we have like on photos data teams and analytics teams. So yeah.
I think a lot of it also just has to do with like staffing and how it's organized. So like for us, we do have a centralized like data team that's supposed to like help pull that information for PMs, but with just staffing issues, it's
Yeah, if you need it, you need it. You need it now. Yeah, makes sense. Cool. That was very interesting. I had no idea, and I've never talked to you about work ever. So this is great.
exactly.
Awesome. So thank you. And for those listening, thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you in the next one.